Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to make a karate uniform for your stuffed animal. Now let's get started! Okay, so the first thing to do is of course cut all my pieces out. So here are the patterns I made for this karate uniform. Like always, I'll have these linked in the description box, and they won't be the exact ones I'm using right now because I made a few adjustments to improve them. I'm going to first cut out all the pieces I need out of the white fabric, and that's pretty much everything except the belt, which I didn't even make a pattern for. But this first one is going to be the front of the top piece. And since I need two pieces that are mirror images of each other, I'm going to fold the fabric in half first and then cut these out. And then for the back piece, I'll only need one. But then moving over to the pants, I'll need two of these pieces. So I'm going to fold over the fabric again. And these should also be mirror images of each other. And then for the sleeves, of course, I'll need two. Oh, and there's one more piece I missed that are these kind of short, skinny rectangles. You'll need two of those. Okay, so here they are. I have 2, 2, 2, and 1. And I'm going to start with these half pieces, and I'm going to take the two rectangles and fold them in half lengthwise. Then I'm going to line up the raw edge of that with this edge and pin it in place. So these two are good side to good side and will fold out. And I left my rectangle a little bit long, but I can just cut off any extra. So now I'm going to use a straight stitch to sew along this edge and repeat the same thing for this other piece. Here's what they look like when they're done. I obviously have to trim this extra kind of band on the side, so I'm going to cut that off and then flip these over to hem the bottoms. I'm trying to keep this extra neat, so I'm folding up the bottom edge twice. Only about 1/4 of an inch though, so still really small. But once I've pinned that down, I can sew this in place and do the same thing to the other one. Something to note though is since this piece is wider at the bottom, you might have a little extra sticking out like this once you fold it up twice. So what I like to do before I sew it is trim it off at kind of an angle like this, and that way there isn't anything sticking out from the front. Okay, here's how they look now, and now I'm going to do the same thing to the back piece. So I'm going to hem that bottom edge by folding it over twice and then pinning it. But while I'm over here, I figured I'd also hem the neckline. So to make this a little easier, I'm going to cut around the steeper parts of the curve. I'm only doing 2 on each side, so there isn't too many separate pieces to work with. And I would like to fold this over twice to make it neater, but with curves like this, I feel like it's just really hard, so I always just do it once. Now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and sew both of these. Next, I can leave this good side facing up and grab my front pieces and flip them good side to good side with this back piece. And right now I just need to sew the shoulders together, so I really only needed like one pin on each for that. But you'll want to make sure that if the width of these shoulders is slightly different, which is possible, you'll want to make sure they're exactly lined up on the inside. So by that I mean the edge closest to the neckline. It doesn't really matter if the other sides are uneven because the sleeves are going to go there. After that, I'm going to trim off any extra from the top and then set this aside to work on the sleeves. All I have to do for these is hem the bottom edges, so like always, I'm going to fold up that bottom edge twice, pin it in place, and sew that with a straight stitch. Now that I've done that to both, I can attach these to the main piece. So I'm going to flip them good side, lining up those curves, and it'll be kind of opposite like this. But just try your best to pin them together as you go, and I like to start in the middle so the overhang is pretty much the same on both sides. Mine lined up pretty perfectly though, which is good. Once I've done that, I can do the same thing for the other sleeve, and then use a straight stitch to sew along where I've pinned. Here is how it looks when it's done. I actually did a zigzag stitch over these raw edges just to keep it extra neat, but that's optional. But I'm doing this because I'm going to be giving this to someone. Next, I'm folding this in half good side, so the bottoms of the sleeves and sides of the top are lined up, and then I'm just pinning along there, and then I'm going to sew this all at once, starting from kind of the wrist to the bottom of the shirt. Okay, now the top half of this karate uniform is done. I'm just going to trim off a little bit of extra sleeve I had on one side, and then just neaten up the edges because I'm going to do a zigzag stitch over those later. But now I can turn this inside out, and I'm not going to try this on my stuffed animal yet, but you'll see that at the very end. I did make some adjustments to the patterns, so it overlapped a little more, and so it was a little longer. Okay, now for the pants part of this. I actually make pants exactly like this in a lot of my other videos, so I'm not going to go step by step through how to make it this time, but if you want to see how to do this the exact same way, you can watch my swim trunks video. The pattern is just a tiny bit different, but it's the exact same process, so you could just follow that. One thing I added to this, which I don't usually add, is a hole for the stuffed animal's tail. It's just a little bit of extra work, but basically I do everything like normal, but then at the end I go to the back of the pants, turn it inside out, and use a seam ripper to cut out a few stitches close to where the tail hole needs to be. So I like to try it on my stuffed animal first to know exactly where it's going to go. Then I use a needle and thread to fold over and sew down those raw edges, as well as kind of locking in place the stitches that I disturbed. So here's how it looked when I finished. The tail hole is looking good, and now I can move on to the last component of this, which is the belt. You can obviously use whatever color you want for this, but I didn't have many solid colors, so I just went with the black belt, really give the stuffed animal a lot of skills. This is basically a rectangle that is about 2.75 inches wide and 29 inches long. So I already have this rectangle cut out, and the first thing I'm going to do is fold it in half, good side to good side, and I'm going to pin that closed along the entire length and then use a straight stitch to sew that. I actually am going to sew one of the short sides closed, so I'm going to start here and then go all the way down to the other side. Just make sure to leave one of the short sides open. Okay, here's what it looks like now. Please don't mind the nail change. My friend and I just had a sleepover last night and she did my nails. But the next thing to do is probably the trickiest part, and that is turning this piece inside out. Luckily I have a really good method for this, but even I was struggling with this one just because it is so long. What I just showed is 2 paintbrushes taped together because you want something really long and skinny to help you with this. It didn't end up holding up, so just use the longest paintbrush you have, or if you have like a really long wooden dowel. But the first thing to do is take the closed end and start turning that inside out. And once you have that started, it should make a little pocket that you can put the paintbrush into. Then you'll want to start pulling the rest of the tube down and around the paintbrush. This does get more difficult the more you pull down because there's just more fabric that's bunching up. Especially with mine, because this fabric I chose was like really durable and thick, but it was the only black fabric I had. But you really have to just keep pulling it down as much as possible, and if you ever get really stuck, you can always remove the paintbrush and pull the rest down, and that should help a little bit. You know you're done when you can finally see that closed end of the tube sticking out like this, and that's when you can remove the paintbrush for the last time and then pull the rest down, and then it should be inside out. Another idea I had for this looking back is to actually leave the opening right in the middle of the tube and then do the same process for each half, and that would hopefully make it easier since you're working with shorter pieces. I ironed this real quick to make it flatter, and here's what it looks like. And now the last thing to do is to close up that open side. So this took me a while because I was trying to fold in the sides of the fabric in, so you would just see a fold on the outside and no raw edges. But after I finally figured that out, I just used my needle and thread to sew kind of just a running stitch all the way across. And I actually ended up having to redo this because my belt was way too long, so I'd suggest trying this on your stuffed animal first before closing up the end, and that way if it's too long you can always cut off any extra. But the measurement I said in this video is the updated one, so I'd follow that. After I've gone all the way across, I'm going to put my needle through one of the stitches and then put the needle through the loop that forms, and that'll lock my stitch. And now the belt is pretty much finished. This is kind of a lot of work though, so if you have just some thicker ribbon, you can always use that. Okay, here is the final set, and now I can try this on. Now, I'll admit I don't know much about karate, so I tried to bust out some moves in the intro and outro, but it was a little difficult. I watched like a video of a 7-year-old doing karate as a reference. But now that I think about it, I actually did do karate when I was a little kid, but didn't really like it, so I only made it up to a yellow belt. When tying the belt, I like to tie it twice and then try to have the ends go down. And as you can see, my belt, I first made it too long, so later I cut off about 3 inches from one of the sides and then re-sewed it. But yeah, that is pretty much it for this karate uniform. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like and comment any suggestions you have, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you next time. Bye!